Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.com.
And Frank from Tested.
And we are back from Frank's shop for another episode of Shop Tips. This is a series in which we tap into your years of experience working in shops of all different sizes with all sorts of materials, tools, and processes to give you guys out there some practical tips for fabrication.
Yep.
Today we're going to talk about clay.
Clay. We're going to talk about water clay and some of the tools that I use with them.
Now, you mentioned water clay specifically. In the past, when you've sculpted Zoidberg, for example, that mass sculpture, when we worked with you at our shop, in our office with Monster Clay, that's not water-based clay.
Those are oil-based clays. Oil-based clays don't dry out. So you could take a sculpture, work on it, set it aside, come back to it weeks or months or a year later, and keep tooling at it. You don't have to worry about keeping it wet or moist or...
Just add heat. Motion, put it in the oven.
Yeah, you can warm it up in the microwave or in the oven, yeah.
Right.
Where you don't want to do that with water clay. Water clay, you have to keep moist, and usually it's something that you use relatively quickly and then move on. But there's two kinds of water clay that we usually use. There's EM210 and EM217. 210 is referred to as white clay, and 217 is referred to as wed clay.
Now,
you know what WED stands for.
I do know what WED stands for. You guys can guess and watch the video. We'll reveal it in a little bit. It's actually really cool. But let's start with white clay.
White clay is what I normally use for mold making. I do a ton of molds here in the shop, and I go through tons of water clay. So this one comes in these boxes. And this is a 50-pound box, and it's a 25-pound bag. And it's relatively cheap. I think that this box is only about $25. And then the wed clay, you can see this is a little bit more brown. So that's a little more brown, this is a little more gray. It's because this has like a mineral oil in it, or castor oil, some people say. I'm not really sure which one it is, but it's got an oil in it. And I think that's what makes the properties so different.
Now you talked about using this as part of your mold making process. Where in that process does this clay fit in?
I use this for claying up walls. Like if I'm going to make a two-part mold, I'll use this to separate the sides. Or if I'm doing a matrix mold, I use this to put all over the object to make that matrix that's going to be filled with silicone. This is like kind of my go-to standard shop clay.
Does it work just right out of the bag here to the prep?
Right out of the bag. Nope, same thing with this, right out of the bag. But this you want to use more for sculpting. Because it's got that mineral oil in it, it'll stay moist a little bit better, a little bit longer, and it won't shrink and crack as fast. It gets to like a leathery stage where you can sculpt fine detail in it. You guys interviewed Mike Hill before, and Mike sculpts almost exclusively in wed clay.
Now, it does have a limited shelf life or lifespan as you're using it. You just don't want to expose it to air?
Yeah, these things, if you keep it in the bag, keep it sealed up like this, it'll last a while. I think this has been on my shelf for almost a year. So this is still fine, still sculptable, still, I don't have to do anything to it. But I go through so much white clay, this is probably only a week old.
So white clay for mold making, wed clay for sculpting, and what about some of the tools you use?
Well, one of the first things that I use when I'm making molds is I use a clay cutting board. There's a bunch of different rigs that people have that you can hold on to that have the string drawn between it at different heights. But this one I think is a little bit easier. I use kind of the same size clay slabs all the time. So this is just stir sticks screwed onto a board, and this is 4, this is 3, and this is 2, so I can get different thicknesses of clay. So when I take this out of here, and I put it on there, depending on which direction I'm pulling it, I'll get it at different thicknesses.
A perfect 2 stir stick thick slab of clay.
Correct. I think that that's easier because then you can make these really quick and really cheap, and you don't have to buy some crazy tool, and you can make a couple of them, and it's just easy. So a lot of times when you're making a clay wall, it'll start to get lumpy like this when you start putting it up against the sculpture. So I use rake tools to start evening out those surfaces. When we did the sculpting, we talked about raking out the surface to even it. So I have a big one, which is just on a big, it's like a piece of metal, and that you can use to do big surfaces. I also have little ones that I can use to further refine those.
Make it less lumpy.
It makes it smooth and straight. And then you can take these spatulas or slicks, and I have a bunch of different kinds. And then you take that, and then all of a sudden the clay's smooth again. So, when you're doing like little stuff, you got a little tool. So I have a couple different sizes of all these things.
Is that an order of operations? You start with the rake, then you go to the spatula?
Yeah, I mean, once you smooth it out with the spatula, there's not a whole lot of reason to go rough it up again.
Exactly.
I also have like smaller kidney tools like this if I'm doing stuff that's got a lot of compound. This is good if you're doing like a flat surface. But if you're doing compound curves, here's a kidney tool with the serration on it. And then here's a rubber kidney tool that's flexible that you can go ahead and smooth those things out. So if you're doing a bunch of curves and a lot of things like that, these kidney tools really come in handy.
Rakes, spatula, kidneys, things to kind of smooth out clay in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, so then if you have this up against your sculpture, so just pretend that this is the sculpture, and this is all smeared there, and you want to get that last little bit and make it nice. I have these little rubber tip tools that you can take and you can just gently rub against the sculpture, and that'll clean up that last little edge. So I have a couple different sizes of these rubber tools. And then if you want to do some registration for like a silicone mold, I have these little pieces of aluminum that I machined with different tips on it. So I can just take it and press it into the clay to do different kinds of registration for silicone molds. So there's that.
And you have those of different sizes as well.
Yeah, I have different sizes. These are the tools that I used when I did all those molds on Star Wars. This is how we did all the registration.
All right. Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing with us some of your tools and tips for working with water-based clay. Oh, we have to answer, what does WED clay stand for?
And what does it stand for, Norm?
Well, it doesn't stand for Wednesday. It actually stands for Walter Elias Disney. It's his initials.
Yeah, WED clay was developed for Disney Imagineering for when they were sculpting stuff for the rides.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you know a little bit more. I hope hopefully you've learned a little bit from this episode of Shop Tips. If you have tips of your own, whether working with clay, wood, other materials, shops of all different sizes, we'd love to hear from you. Post them in the comments below. But until next time, it's Frank. I'm Norm. We'll see you.